Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of America's most famous families, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. We're not just talking about the people, we're talking about the story that's been built around them. We're going to use our sources to really dissect that narrative and figure out what it's actually telling us.
So that's the big question, right? Is what we see faith and family, or is it something closer to fan fiction? We're going to try and get past the headlines and really understand how the story around the Duggar family's big moments gets put together. What do they focus on? And maybe more importantly, where does that story just not line up with reality?
All right, first up, a legacy of family. So let's start right at the beginning. At the foundation, according to all these accounts, what is the Duggar brand really, truly built on?
Okay, so what we see again and again in our sources is this really clear formula. It boils down to these three words: faith, family, love. But here's the thing. They're not just presented as, personal values. They're basically positioned as the engine that drives the family's entire public identity. It's the core of their whole appeal.
And of course, you can't talk about their legacy without talking about the sheer scale of it all. I mean, 19. The number of kids from the original show, 19 kids and counting, it's absolutely crucial. It basically set the stage for a full-blown dynasty, where every single new baby isn't just a happy family moment, it's a very public event, a continuation of that huge legacy.
Okay, Section 2, the joy of new life. So, we've got the foundation. Now let's see how it actually plays out in real time. We're going to dive into how our sources talk about new babies arriving, and you'll see these moments are always framed as these perfect, joyous, almost legendary occasions.
And the language they use is so important to building the story. I mean, take this quote from one of our sources: "An unbroken chain of love and faith." Wow. See, it's not just about a new baby, is it? It's framed as this epic continuation of the entire family line. This super emotional, almost fairy tale tone is something you see over and over. It's how they turn these really personal moments into these big, powerful public symbols that hammer home those core family values.
But it's not just about feelings and poetic language. There's an actual playbook for this stuff. Our sources lay out this step-by-step guide to a Duggar celebration. It's like a well-oiled machine designed to produce joy. The accounts get into all the details. We're talking cheery balloons, delicate pastels, even a handmade quilt from a sister-in-law. Every single piece is there for a reason, to paint this perfect picture of family unity and tradition. Part 3. Under the public microscope. Okay, but here's where it gets complicated. According to our sources, this super polished, very public story, it comes with a price. And that price is just this intense, non-stop public scrutiny, where every little thing is picked apart and analyzed. And, as you can imagine, not always correctly.
And yeah, this is exactly where that public microscope becomes a real problem. The story of Abbie Duggar's rumored pregnancy is a perfect example. It shows this huge clash between what fans were speculating about and what was actually happening in her life. So while the whole online narrative was focused on a baby bump, what the sources report is that she was actually dealing with a really severe illness, one that even landed her in the hospital.
And the sources get really specific here, which is important. They kind of ground all that wild online speculation in a cold, hard clinical fact. They report that Abbie was suffering from something called hyperemesis gravidarum, and that's a really serious medical condition. Suddenly, that one detail just completely flips the script, right? The narrative goes from one of happy, joyful anticipation to one of very real, very difficult physical hardship. All right, Section 4, a complicated blessing. So, when you pull all these different pieces together, what's the real story being told about a Duggar family milestone? It's pretty clear it's not just about a new baby, is it? It's way more complicated than that.
So what's the big takeaway here? What it all seems to add up to is this. The sources are painting a picture where the blessing of a new child gets really tangled up with the huge pressure of having this public legacy. These very personal family moments, they become major public events, and they're built on this perfect, idealized story of joy. But that perfect image is what invites all this intense scrutiny, which can and does clash, sometimes really painfully, with what's happening behind the scenes.
And that really leaves us with this one big question, doesn't it? It just highlights the incredibly complex reality of living your life in the spotlight. It kind of forces you and me to think about that very fine line between celebrating a public family and feeding a narrative that might be miles away from the truth. It really makes you wonder what the real story is, behind the one we're all being told.